Ooh, ooh.
Please don't ever do that again, Stephen.
I'm
Great
waiting
way
for her to.
start things.
There we go.
We're live now. Great way to start things out. All right. So many prompt people. Our attendees are filling up. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. You have 5 panelists and then myself who are going to be walking through, your hottest GA4 questions. We want to get them answered. And we'll get started in just a moment. We're going to give a few more seconds here for people to join. All right, and I'm going to share my screen. Cool. All right, so we're super excited. There's a lot of things going on right now in the industry as it relates to Google Analytics and Google Analytics 4. We really appreciate you all taking the time to really, out of your busy weeks, because I'm sure there's a lot going on before the holidays. So we want to jump right in, get your questions answered about GA4 and really set you on a good path for 2021 and going forward. All right, so we have 5 folks that are going to be joining us today. 3 are going to be leading our panel discussion. And then we have 2 folks who will be in the live chat in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So at any point you want to engage with people who are here, we have a good amount of people from different industries, different companies. So feel free to use that chat box to Q&A. And from there, we have 5 panelists who are going to be joining, and we're going to start with a quick introduction. And as a heads up, my name is Kaya. I'm the marketing manager at Seer on the marketing team. And I'm going to pass it to James real quick if you want to give a quick intro, get our audience.
Thanks, Kaya. Hey, everyone. My name is James Core. I'm a senior analytics team lead here at Seer. I've been at Seer for over 6 years. And as a team lead, I manage a team of amazing folks like Emily, Stephen, Catherine, and Winter. So account managers, developers, and associates to help our clients achieve their measurement goals. I'll hand it over to Emily.
All right, hello, my name is Emily Best. I'm an analytics manager here at Seer. I've been with Seer for about 2 years now. And as an analytics manager, I help clients strategize their measurement as well as consult them on anything related to that. And then I work in Google Analytics every day, so this is a very interesting topic to me.
Hi, everyone. Stephen Harris. I am our lead developer here at Seer, and my background is in full stack web development. And I've been getting really deep into the analytics side of things for about 6 years now. And that's majority implementations, as well as a hodgepodge of all sorts of different things across the measurement stack.
Hi, I'm Catherine Blake. I'm also an analytics developer at Seer for the past 1.5 years, and I focus on custom tracking and advanced implementations of Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager.
Hi, everyone. My name is Winter Schweibold. I am a senior analytics associate here at Seer, and I've been here for about 1.5 years. I work with clients in a wide variety of industries, and I'm in Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager every day, and I absolutely love it. So super excited that you all are here with us today.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. So before we get started, I just want to give a quick rundown of what you can expect in the next hour. So in advance, we had asked you all to submit some questions that you had. It was totally optional. We ended up getting a lot. So there's over 40. And in typical Seer fashion, we took a look at the data and the trends of what you guys were asking. And we used that to shape our presentation today and some of the discussion topics that we have. So most of you were interested in the new features and the new reports in GA4. Good amount of people wanted to know about the best way to prepare for migration. And then a lot of people were just generally showing their disdain over the fact that this is happening and Google's moving, replatforming. Hopefully we can alleviate some of those concerns today, get you all excited, start using the new tool. So as a quick heads up, we have 15 minutes at the end of today's discussion where we want to have you all ask our panelists questions. The only way that we're going to be able to do that is if you use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you can just take a quick look now, check it out. That's where we will take your questions and choose to answer them live. And then the chat feature and functionality can be used, if you have just general commentary, you want to engage with other people who are there. Enough housekeeping. You didn't come to listen to me talk, so let's just jump right in. And as a little kind of icebreaker, I want to ask a quick poll. So you should see on your screen now, And this question is just, how would you rate your Google Analytics knowledge? If you can take a second to answer that, and then we'll share the results with you all. That'll kind of help us frame some of our discussions here today. You're all fast. That's great. See them all coming in. Awesome. Give it one more second. And let's see what we got here. All right, it's kind of what we expected. More than half of you are like, I know how to use the data, get the data that I need out of Google Analytics and get out. And then we have a good amount of people who are also like, I do this for a living. So that's great to see. We will share these results so you can take a look at that as well. And awesome. I'm going to jump right in. So James, I want to start with you. Can you just give us a quick introduction? What is Google Analytics for? Why is Google making this big shift and decision now? And it's like, what are the main benefits? Like, what can we look forward to as part of the new platform?
Yeah, thanks, Kaya. I think the best way to start us off here is to simply say that GA4 represents a paradigm shift. It represents a different way of thinking about both measurement and collection of that measurement, as well as how we analyze and actually end up using that same data. So we're representing it much more as a completely new product and thinking about it from a completely new sense than it is, let's migrate and let's just move to this new thing. Let's upgrade our Google Analytics. Well, of course, that is actually what's happening, but it's actually much bigger than that. So we'll get into a little bit more about why that is in a few slides. But first, let's talk about how we got here, right? Why we got here. And that has to do with the legacy of Google Analytics. So it's built off of an old code base. So Google Analytics, or Google, originally acquired a software company called Urchin. And they produced a product called Urchin Analytics. And this was what was originally turned into Google Analytics back in 2005. Moving a step forward, the current iteration of Google Analytics, or what most of us are going to refer to as GA for short, in its current iteration, it's called Universal Analytics. And this is technically the third iteration of the code base, but you can see it came out about 5 years ago into production. Moving a little further along, we get into 2019, and this is where you start to see the emergence of what becomes GA4 with the release of App plus Web. This was a beta launch, and if you move a little bit more forward in time, into 2020, the year we're in now, Google actually relaunched the platform and renamed it as Google Analytics 4. And I'll speak a little bit as to why we think that is a little bit later on, but it's not super meaningful for you all to know. So what is important to know is that GA4 represents the future of Google Analytics. And in 21, we expect it to launch to all users, and that's when you'll really start living into it. So that's when things really start to hit the pavement. But let's talk about some of the main benefits, right? Why would you want to live into GA4? Obviously, Google's moving in this direction, but a big use case here is that we're living into a user-centric data model. It's all centered around an event user-centric data model. And essentially what this ends up meaning is that we have a better understanding of our users' journeys across their devices and platforms. So we can also use their deduplicated first-party data to better understand and recognize these users. Next up, machine learning and artificial intelligence are at the forefront of the product. They are built around these things, whereas this was much more added on to Google Analytics previously. So some of the ways you'll see this come into the product are through the search. You can use natural language to actually ask questions of your data, and you'll actually get relevant results and be able to navigate your data a lot more seamlessly through search. You'll also start to see things like predictive audiences. So you can create audiences that you can then advertise to that will predictively buy something in 7 days or something like that. The next key benefit or big benefit here is that analysts can rejoice. There's a lot more built-in advanced analysis capabilities. So if you're a GA360 customer, you may know some of the analysis reports like segment overlap and explore. So Google Analytics 4 brings those to everyone. They will be a part of the base free product. And it also adds a few new things like pathing. So if you're an Adobe user, pathing is really powerful over there. Google Analytics historically hasn't done a great job, but aims to fix that with GA4. So it's a really exciting analysis tool as well. And last but definitely not least, Google's investing for a future that is very privacy centric, to navigate a lot of legislation and things that are happening in the world around data and its use. So GA4 is really built with that in mind at the forefront as well. So taking a step back, let's talk a little bit more about what sets GA4 apart from a structural standpoint. In universal analytics, kind of if you could go back one or two here, in universal analytics, you have a construct called a user. And they have, when they come to your website or app, sessions. And sessions are made up of things like page views, or what's represented here as those little boxes of PV, and events. So page views and events get aggregated into sessions. And over time, users have many sessions that are made up of these different interactions with your websites and apps, right? Conversely, in Google Analytics 4, we still have the construct of a user, but things change. There isn't this specific construct of a session. Sessions still exist and they still get calculated and they're still there in GA4, but the structure is much flatter. Everything actually turns into an event. So a page view is now an event. A download is still an event as it was previously, but everything kind of gets in this flat structure where events are associated with users. So they're not aggregated directly to a session now. They're much more effectively attached to a user than they were previously. And this enables us to do a lot more analysis and dive more deeply, but be super flexible with the way that we look at data as well. And again, as I imagine most of you are coming from universal analytics, where we have some events. You may be wondering, okay, events, got it, but how does this change with GA4? Well, taking a little bit closer look at that, in universal analytics, we have these things called event category, action, and label. There's also value. And these often operate in a somewhat hierarchical structure. So they allow you to aggregate things at the top level with event categories, but kind of see deeply down with event actions and labels. So you can kind of do both things. It's somewhat flexible, but also pretty rigid, right? In GA4, everything, as I mentioned before, is an event, so it has a name. And then there are a bunch of parameters tied to that event. So this allows a lot more flexibility and scalability in the way that you look at that data. So the structure itself has completely changed. So everything is built around this event model. And lastly, kind of tying everything together, kind of summarizing everything that I just went through, represented here on this slide. This means the impact of everything is that app data, website data, and other offline data sets like CRMs are commonly tied into Google Analytics, or other things that you can send to GA, all are tied together in a singular location. Whereas previously, historically, they were separated in different places in GA, different properties and things like that. So going forward, we'll be able to actually analyze and see everything in one place, because there's no page view versus screen view. If you're talking about app versus website data, everything is now an event and everything is flat. So we can actually analyze and see these things across all of the relevant data sets.
All right, thank you, James. Now that we know a little bit more about what GA4 is, Emily, can you walk us through what's the difference between GA4 and Universal Analytics, and what's new? What can we be excited about? And also, what does it look like? I think a lot of people have been very interested to see behind the curtain. So hopefully you can walk us through some of those things.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you for introducing GA4, James. One of the main highlights of what's different, James covered in pretty depth detail there, was just that GA4 focuses more on events as well as users, and less so on sessions. And this allows us to take a look at people's activities across platforms and devices. One thing here we have shown is that events can be actually modified and created within the interface. So the interface is meant to be a lot more user-friendly for the end user. However, wanted to call out that we don't have event categories, actions, and labels anymore as we knew it before. All right, and so taking a look at the report structure here, this is also something that's vastly different. You might have seen it, you may or may not like it, but we're gonna get used to learning how to use these new reports. And I think we'll find that they are actually easier to use. So in the current GA reports, if you click into audience or something like that, you're going to see like 10 different reports in there. There's one for every single use case, and it might be difficult to hop from report to report to find the information you're looking for. In Google Analytics 4, the reports are going to be grouped a little bit more based on users, as well as how you might find ROI. And then there are fewer reports within each section. So they're meant to be really high level. And then if you wanted to do further analysis, you would use the analysis tool that is now available to all users, not just GA360 users. Yep, and then James went through a couple of these items here, wanting to call out the Explore, the funnel analysis, segment overlap, pathing. These are really great tools for analysis. The analysis area here is different from GDS. I know a lot of you may be using GDS. That is more for data visualization, like bar charts and tables. This one is more about like modeling, and you're using Google Analytics data to do this. Next, another area of focus for Google Analytics 4 is machine learning using predictive metrics. Here in Google Analytics now, we do have some of these insights. However, with Google Analytics 4, we'll have more of those. And then as we start to collect data, these insights are going to get better and better. Again, with machine learning, we just need to have enough data points for the machine to learn and give you insights that are valuable.
Awesome. So I think that gives us a good understanding of, all the things that are different, what's new, but I don't think it's anything until you see it, until you really can set your eyes on it and see kind of what it's like, the experience. So Emily, I'm going to stop sharing, and would you walk us through the GA4 interface and give us some tips? What are the 3 reports that everyone should use when they first get into GA4, and kind of think about it that way?
Yep, yeah, and I'm sharing my screen now, so hopefully everyone can see that, but this is the user acquisition report. This is pretty similar to the acquisition report that is in the current Google Analytics property right now. However, I would say that I really like how these charts are, you have the over time view here, and you can see it broken down by the different mediums. That's kind of like the channels. And then you can also see it in aggregate here across the time frame. So both are really good to see. And then again, you have it broken down by the different mediums. You can also use the same search functions. So even though a lot of things look different, a lot of things are also still the same. Another report that's really good is this engagement report, and you can take a look at events. Again, here you can see how many events were enacted on over time. And then you can also see how this relates to the total number of users and the events that were enacted. And here you can see some more details below. And then next here is the screenshot that we were showing, but this is the all events report. Here you can see all the events you have tracked, if you can modify and create them. I just wanted to call out here that this is like the Sears testing ground. So do as we say, not as we do. I would name this as our GA test property. And then these are just some test events that we sent in there beyond what is built in and recommended right now. But what is really cool is you can see the count of these events, as well as the users, the change over time. And then with GA4, we don't have Google Analytics goals anymore. So you can use this section here to mark events as goals, and then you won't be restricted to the current way Google Analytics takes a look at goals. You only have a small set of reports you can use. Now, when you're turning these events into conversion events, you can take a look at them across various reports. Cool. And I will stop sharing now and send that back over to you, Kaya.
Cool, perfect. Thank you for that. And so now, we've got a good understanding of what GA4 is, what it looks like, and We see the questions coming into the Q&A. So happy to be getting those. We'll start responding and then also start choosing some for the end to walk through. But really quickly, want to do another quick poll here. You should see that coming up on your screen. So before we get into the preparation, like how do you start preparing for GA4? Want to know, have you already started preparing? Maybe you've already set up a test property or you've created a new property. Maybe you're so ahead of the game, you're completely using it now instead of universal analytics. Kudos to you if so, you move fast. But we want to just get an understanding of, how have people started preparing and when. All right, looks like we got a lot of people here. So I'm going to end this now. I'm going to share the results. So it looks like most people have not, but they'd like to start soon, which is great. Stephen has a lot of great tips for everyone coming up. Also, some people have test properties set up, which are great. And we did also notice in the questions that we were getting in advance that some people had very specific issues with the platform that they wanted to know. And any question like that, we'll definitely make sure and follow up with. But it's good to see this and definitely something that we'll keep in mind. So Stephen, I will pass it back to you.
Awesome.
So in terms of preparation, who should be starting to prepare now? And what's really that first step? Maybe you can talk through, have you started implementing GA4 for some clients? If so, what are some of the sights and sounds that one company would want to run at the hills with GA4 now versus maybe not, maybe just test now? Can you just give us a quick idea of that?
Sure. So there are many nuances to that question and lots of different considerations that are going to come into play when you're making that decision for your project or your organization. So this is an oversimplification, what we're looking at right now. But generally, as the complexity of your analytics setup and the depth of your analytics resources increase, it decreases the likelihood that this is going to be something that you're going to be doing very soon, very quickly. And the reason for that is because you're going to have a more involved process in getting that ready. That's not to say you can't start preparing now and start trying things out now, but this is going to be a journey. This isn't going to be a migration that you plan and you're going to flip the switch and you're going to be on GA4 all of a sudden. And you can identify a specific date in the very near future when that's going to happen. Nothing's ready for that. GA4 is not ready for that. There are lots of features that are still being developed. There are still things that are coming. There may be things that we have said today that are going to be different 3 months down the line, whether it's some specific quota or the availability of a feature. Those things are still in progress. And as we've seen, this is a huge shift from what we've had before in Google Analytics. One of the first sections here showed the history of Google Analytics. And this is the first time, this is the biggest shift in all of that history. Case in point, that very first version that Google bought, Urchin Analytics, way back in the day, that has then had a few iterations, that tracking code from that first version still works in Universal Analytics. That's no longer going to be the case with GA4. All those generations have kind of had big improvements, but they've been iterations on the same fundamental model. This is a brand new model, which means that comes with a lot of new things to learn. You have to throw away old ways of thinking, things that you're used to. So the learning curve here is also going to be a component to that timeline. And yeah, and then different integrations, all your reports and everything. It's not just migrating tracking, but making sure everything is coming over. So with more complex setups, you're going to have more things to do there. What you can start doing now to set up is just set up a GA4 property. One of the awesome things about GA4 is that it really ups the ante on hitting the ground running, and it bootstraps your setup with a few things that just you never had before. So historically, you would put Google Analytics on your page, and you could get page views by default. And in most cases, that would work pretty well. With GA4, you're going to get a lot more out of the box. You are one of those important things is enhanced measurement, which gives you a few different events around the types of user measure of user engagement metrics that happen pretty universally, whether that's scroll tracking and things of that nature. So what you can do now, if you're tracking to universal analytics, you're going to want to send that over to GA4 as well. And you can just start with page views, maybe, enable enhanced measurement. That's going to take you all of 15 minutes. And if you're using Google Tag Manager, as you probably should be, even better, because that's going to be a very simple task to get that set up and deployed. If you want to go beyond that and start playing with some custom events, some user attributes, that'd be great. And you can do that as well. And you start to learn and get a feel and compare your universal analytics data with what's coming into GA4, track some of the same things, and see how those things are a bit different and where you can find some parity.
And Stephen, one question that someone had in advance was, is there any situation in which you would not move to GA4, you would not use GA4 and you'd continue using universal analytics? And if so, what's the impact on doing that?
So I think the answer right now for most cases is you would not move to GA4 because nothing's ready yet immediately. The exception being app tracking. So if you were doing a new app implementation, you need to do that on GA4. It's not possible to set up a new property in the in anything older. Looking into the future, I can't think of a case where you would say, I don't want to switch from Universal Analytics to GA4, since it's such a substantial shift and there's all these pieces around it, it's a useful time to consider all your options. So you might want to not go to GA4 because you're looking at a different platform, a non-Google platform that maybe caters to your specific needs better, where you've been with Google, and as your analytics maturity has grown and the landscape has changed, the businesses have changed, maybe you are looking for something that is a bit more tuned to your specific business needs. So that's kind of a general answer, but I think that's the only kind of scenario where you're going to say, I'm not going to move to GA4, you're going to move to something else. By the way, Universal Analytics isn't going anywhere for a while. It is going to be deprecated. GA4 will become the new standard, but that's not going to happen for some time now.
That's great. And some other questions that are already coming through the Q&A that are relevant to this. So when GA4 starts, it's going to be all new data, all new property. Do you have any advice for people as they have historical data that already exists? Like, how should they be looking at that? Should they be trying to create parity between tracking, or should it be looked at as something totally new and separate?
So generally the answer is no. It's so fundamentally different. You're not going to be looking to achieve parity. What you will have parity with is your business objectives. What is important to your business? So you're going to want to track those same things and understand historical tracking versus what you're getting in GA4. Understand how it may be fundamentally different. If there's a shift in metrics, understanding the reasons why behind that, and that it's tracking some of the same user behavior, but the platform has changed, and that's why you want to start preparing for that and tracking some of the same things and not looking for parity, but looking for understanding in this new data model. As far as migrating a tracking implementation and naming conventions and that sort of thing, you can absolutely take your existing universal analytics tracking and simply start mirroring that to GA4. In fact, that can be a really quick way to get up and running in GA4. Just take, event category, as James showed you, you have an event name and then all these event parameters in GA4. which is different from the rigid event category action label value that you have in Universal Analytics. So, but you can, all those parameters in GA4 are custom. So you can make parameters that are category action label value, and you can just pass those into GA4. However, while that's a very quick and easy way to get up and running and start just getting data, the exact same data in GA4, that is a missed opportunity to take advantage of this, the robust setup that you can have in GA4 and really embrace some of these new ideas. So a lot that you can do in GA4, pretty much everything we've talked about and showed you can be done. It's possible to do in Universal Analytics for the most part. Anything is possible. It's a matter of time and money, right? But in GA4, you have a lot more ease in setting those things up, and some of those things are built in, and it's designed from the ground up to be more future facing, right? So if you are taking Universal Analytics paradigms and applying them in GA4, you are not embracing that opportunity to really set yourself up for success in the years to come. So I would say start with a new event model. What you want to do is look at the built-in events, look at the Google's recommended custom event naming, which includes both event names and event parameters, and build off of that. Really try to get your events aligned with their recommended event names, because that's going to give you advantages in some of the built-in reporting. And then beyond that, if you have anything that is still not addressed in that set, you can add your own custom events. And one little tip is don't go too granular with your event names. Try to make those as high level as you can, and use event parameters to break out the details of different sorts of events.
No, that's great. We have a lot of questions in the Q&A. I'm going to start kind of sifting through those now. And these are kind of open to anyone. Actually, everyone keep adding their questions now. We want to start with a few that were actually submitted in advance. And Catherine and Winter, maybe you can help us out here. So a lot of you had questions already about the changes, if any, that Google's making to attribution in GA4, what that looks like, and how you can best understand the data when it starts coming in. Catherine, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the default attribution model does remain the cross-channel last click in Google Analytics 4. However, with these new properties, you can actually customize reports by adjusting the attribution model. So there are a couple of additional options you have there. There's cross-channel last engagement, which will either attribute a conversion to the last click or an ad impression if there was no recent click. And then this model also excludes direct traffic as well. And then there are two Google Ads preferred attribution models. So there is last click, where analytics will then attribute your conversion to Google Ads, whether or not that there was a click from another source in between the last click from Google Ads. Or then there's the Google Ads preferred last engagement model, which will attribute the conversion to the most recent Google Ads click, or if there was no click, it would be the most recent Google ad impression. So we do have some additional options there. And I believe Google is still working to enhance the attribution available in GA4 at the moment as well.
That's great to know. I know attribution's always been a pain point for many folks, so it's good to know we're at least moving towards a better model for that. And so another question here actually for Winter. So how will GA4 handle sampling? I think sampling is the big story that, the more data you have and the more granular you're using that data, you're more prone to sampling, especially when you don't have the paid version of the product, Google Analytics 360. So Winter, how will GA4 handle sampling? Is it the same as Universal Analytics? Kind of talk through that.
Yeah, so to answer it simply, yes, Google Analytics 4 does sample your data, and the threshold is 10 million events per analysis query. So it also really depends on what reports you're looking at and the different customizations you make. So we have our set of standard reports that will provide you with unsampled data, but we will have to keep in mind sampling when we're dealing with reports in the analysis hub and some more custom reports when we're adding additional dimensions or filters to our data. From my personal experience, I've really run into sampling mostly when I'm getting really granular in that analysis hub and building out tables that add multiple dimensions. So that's really where the bulk of sampling has happened for me personally.
Oh, that's really good to know. Thanks for that. So another question that the audience had, and we can actually just have Winter answer that one as well. What's the difference between Data Studio and Advanced Analysis? So a lot of folks, it seems like even in the Q&A now, are using Data Studio. Can you just speak to what the differences are? Why would you use one or the other? And if so, why? And kind of speak through that.
Yeah, so the Analysis Hub does have like the touch and feel that Data Studio has. It looks very similar, it's drag and drop. But I would compare the Analysis Hub more to a custom report rather than a Data Studio dashboard. So in Universal Analytics, we had the custom reports where we can create custom funnels and whatnot. And that's really where the Analysis Hub replaces that. So the Analysis Hub is great for getting really granular with your data, making flat tables that go into depth using different dimensions, but it also has a lot of features that Data Studio doesn't have. So creating like a pathing chart or segment overlap or custom funnels, that's really where the Analysis Hub will come in handy over Data Studio, which we all know as a great dashboarding tool that's probably better than the Analysis Hub when it comes to data visualization and dynamic reports.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing with Data Studio is that, it connects to so many other data sources, but also Data Studio is never going to be something where you can apply, techniques like this, like advanced analysis and the gallery that's available. Data Studio is always going to be used for data visualization a lot more than it is going to be used for really in-depth like business intelligence and analysis. So I think what a lot of Data Studio users will find at using advanced analysis is that it's almost filling a gap of something that you don't have in Data Studio. Like you don't have pathing abilities or conversion funnels, although you can make them if you're tricky enough with the way that you set things up. It's not scalable, so it's going to be great to have a way to really like use your data in the interface of Google Analytics in a more strategic way. And another question here, so a few people have asked already, there's no longer going to be views in GA4, only properties. And I think that's a huge shift for any Google Analytics user. Everyone's kind of used to that account structure. And this is something, hopefully Catherine, you can speak to and anyone else on the panel, but how do we start understanding, how do we get our minds around that idea of not having views anymore? And how does that impact filters in the way that we're filtering data? So some people have mentioned like IP addresses that they filter out. Is all of that still going to be possible with GA4? How is that changing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's definitely been something that's a learning curve, I think, for everyone getting used to this completely new format. You can still create filters. However, we don't have the same range of filters available to us that we did in the Universal Analytics view filters. The data filters are created at the property level, as you said. Currently, there's two main types. Those are include or exclude internal traffic or developer traffic, and you can create rules to apply those filters to your data. And then where we have in Universal Analytics, you can optionally check a box to exclude traffic from known bots and spiders. That's automatically happening in Google Analytics 4 without having to configure anything. And then where we can kind of replace the filters that we would have used for a view in Universal Analytics, where we were using find and replace logic, you can actually edit events directly in the user interface in GA4. So that's currently what we have available with regard to filtering data in GA4.
Just to add one more thing there, I think Catherine nailed that, but just wanted to call out that Google's very much aware the community's usage of views, and they are, I can't get into the details, but they are working on solutions related to views. So expect to see more on that front. I don't know if that means that there will be views explicitly in GA4 at a later date or not, but just know that Google's very much aware of how they're used. So they're thinking about this problem, and we'll probably see something there in the future.
Awesome. So that's really good to know. And, you know, those were some of the questions that we didn't answer in advance. Do you want to start answering some that are in the Q&A now? And these can really be open to anyone on our panel today. I'm going to start with Jake Lyle. Also, hi, Jake. It's been a while. We used to work together a while back. Are there any additional benefits with GA360 with upgrading to GA4? So GA360, for those who don't know, is the premium version of Google Analytics. So it's the enterprise version. James and you know, on the panel, can you speak to if GA4 is adopting a lot of the same features as GA360 is there still value in GA360 as a whole, and what can we kind of look forward to? I'll add to that. What can we look forward to for GA4 360 in the future?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question, and a very real question for a lot of people, right? So number one, I'll call out that there absolutely is a difference in benefits between the two. Again, I can't get into the details, but know that Google is working on an enterprise product for GA4 as well. And I can say right now that one of the key features will be that data collection won't be limited. So there will be quotas to the amount of data that you can collect in GA4 in different ways. And one of the things they aim to solve with GA4, the Enterprise Edition, whatever they end up calling it, will help to solve that specific issue. So if that is something that's concerning, if you send a large volume of data, if you need data in more real time, there will be limits on the free product, whereas that won't exist for aspects of the paid product.
Makes sense. And one more question to add on to that too. So from the same person, do we know the list of other data sources that we'll be able to pull into GA4 at the beginning of this? James, you had spoken to one of the major benefits of GA4, you know, is the way that they're introducing their data model, and what can we expect, you know, moving forward for other data sources and also other products within the Google marketing platform. So Google Ads and Search Console, can we expect the same thing that we see in Universal Analytics? Is any of that changing? That's really what we want to know.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear some input from other folks, in particular Stephen, Catherine, on some of this, but I'll speak to some of the GMP or Google Marketing Platform integrations. Again, currently as it stands today, GA4 is lacking a lot of those integrations, especially if you're an enterprise customer looking for integrations with things like Campaign Manager or Display and Video 360 and some of the other products within the GMP suite. Those don't exist for GA4 today, but know that Google is working towards integrating all of the GMP products. So expect more there. As far as like AdWords goes, absolutely. And there actually is a integration between AdWords and GA4 today. There's also a integration between BigQuery, Google's completely hosted analytics web analytics data warehouse as well. So that's a really powerful aspect of GA4 too that does have an integration at the free level that didn't exist at the free level for Google Analytics today. It's only available for the GA360. So it's another important call out. The last thing I'll say, and then I want to pass it off, is that just like Google Analytics, you can send data to it from any system that is able to send an internet like request, essentially. So there's lots of ways to send offline data. So you can do that for Internet of Things. You can do that for CRM. You can do it for point of sale systems. There's lots of other use cases that GA4 will continue to leverage and use, just like you can do in GA today.
Yep, and I just will add to that, springboarding off of the last two things you mentioned. One, the ability to send data into this system from anywhere, and that being also a universal analytics feature. However, that is there's this beautiful new part of that, which addresses a longstanding issue of analytics spam, and it's one that may not solve every single case. However, you are able to set keys, private keys, on the data that comes in, so that that can be authenticated for a data stream. And so that is also an upgrade in that respect, where you can send data from any system using an HTTP request into GA4. Also, the BigQuery integration is something I really want to emphasize, and I think it's kind of a almost a shoe-in as one of the answers for many different questions here, where you're asking if there's a particular integration or a particular option, or what is the nature of machine learning and how that's going to fit in. There's the BigQuery integration really opens up the box on what you can do with GA4. One of those features that was previously only available to 360 customers in Universal Analytics without a lot of manual work. So it's available out the gate for anyone. And it really opens up that door to integrating, getting around sampling, all sorts of different things. Even the machine learning thing, there's a BigQuery ML platform that lets you apply models to your analytics data and lets you really get geared up without obviously you're going to need to learn a bit, but it does make that a lot more accessible to a lot more people. And that's something that I hope many of us are aiming to capitalize on with GA4.
No, and that's all great and really good context. And if you guys have additional questions on that, like I mentioned before, use that Q&A box and keep sending them along. Gonna kind of take it from the top with those now, and talked about this a little bit before. And I think, Emily, you showed it to us, how you can click a little toggle and turn events into goals. But I think our audience wants to know, Lewis said, without event categories, how can you differentiate conversions, a request for quote form submitted versus a newsletter subscription, et cetera? Can you just speak to the general event setup and structure? Anyone on the panel really for GA4?
I can hop in quickly because I had the same question. Originally, you could not, and the workaround was to just have a different event name. So you'll have form sign up or lead gen event name, and you would make that different for each different sort of thing if you wanted different conversions for each of those things. Or for example, if you have a form submit event name and you want to have a parameter where it's valid, true or false, you couldn't make that conversion contingent on that parameter. That's either been, I'm not sure if it's already implemented, but there should be more ability to use parameters to make those things more granular, even within the same event. So that should be, you can expect more of that. But in the meantime, if that's not already in place, the workaround would be to use different event names.
Awesome. All right. And a few others here. So this is a good question, actually one that I don't think we've touched on yet. Is the way that UTMs and tagging your links and tracking your campaigns, is that changing at all with GA4? Can you speak to just the general, like how, if you're a marketer and you're going to GA4, are things going to be drastically different for you in order to measure your campaigns and their success?
I want to see if anybody else has other thoughts here, because I don't know top to bottom. I do know that UTM parameters are going to continue to be the thing. They're going to continue to work. I don't want to say there won't be anything else added, because who knows, there might be other parameters that are going to be introduced. But as of now, UTM is still the standard. I don't think those may ever go anywhere, because even other non-Google systems have come to respect that as a standard and integrate with them. One little call out is the auto linker parameter is slightly different. So if you have any systems that have a set of rules for checking or ignoring certain parameters, you will need to change that piece for migrating to GA4. But for attribution, UTM parameters should continue to work.
Yep. Yeah. And to add to that, in the acquisition reports, you can still take a look at the source medium that users come in from. If you look in acquisition and then traffic acquisition, so you'll still see those details in your GA4 instance.
That's great to know. So I think we spoke a little bit more about the connecting the data sources, but one thing we didn't touch on and someone has a question on is, will you be able to connect the data from your existing GA account, your Universal Analytics account, with GA4 so that you see both of those things in one? And I think, Stephen, you spoke a little bit earlier about, looking at it as this is something new and something that you want to start fresh, but just generally, is it possible to do that now?
It is not. And I doubt that is going to be something that's ever going to be possible inside of GA, given the very distinct data models. However, I mean, you should be able to build reports, for example, in Data Studio or a Tableau or something that takes them as separate data sources and can allow you to see changes over time.
Super helpful. We just got one now. I think, James, you mentioned you wanted to answer it. What do you
Real
recommend?
quick, I think there was another question about like combining GA and GA4.
Yeah.
We may have answered, but I think it's worth calling out in Google Data Studio explicitly. Will like GA4 kind of just replace it? And how will that kind of work? So I just wanted to call out that Universal Analytics, just like, let's say if you had AdWords or Facebook and you were trying to represent that in Google Data Studio, just like you would need to add a new data source and then visualize that and set up the connections, you're going to do the same thing for GA4. It represents a completely new data source. So you do not expect to just open Google Data Studio and have, after you've upgraded to GA4, let's say, and have that all implemented, don't expect to go to Google Data Studio and your Google Analytics connection now just shows you your GA4 data. That's not the case. You will have to go through and actually re-implement what you had set up for Google Analytics Universal via the GA4 connector in GDS as well. Sorry, I know that you were getting to another question, but I thought that was relevant to that specific question. I wanted to call that out.
No, that's great. It's actually something that I think everyone will need to know, especially people who are very like avid Data Studio users. So that's definitely helpful. Looks like we have 4 more here, so I'm just going to go top to bottom. So that's actually a really interesting question about how do you, when, this is agency focused, but I think it could be applied to anything, but how do you go behind the client's answer of my KPI is sales in terms of tracking events and conversions that make sense? So, there's several custom dimensions that you'll be able to use, but how do you make sure that the things that you're implementing in GA4, just like in Universal Analytics, are going to be important and be able to answer business questions? How do you go about that at SEER as well for clients? Anyone?
So I think I answered this one in the text, so I'll start us off here. Just like Google Analytics, you can pretty much track anything, right? Like that's not really a problem in today's world. You can track highlighting text, you can track downloading things, you can track browser navigations, video plays, etc., so on and so forth. So it becomes more a question of what's important to your business and what are you going to use to make decisions? And with those decisions, how is that going to impact your business's bottom line or your goals, right? So at SEER, we focus everything on those last couple of questions that I just mentioned. How is this new piece of tracking or measurement going to impact our decision-making? How is it going to help us inform our decision-making to improve our bottom line or improve awareness, those sorts of questions? So from a process standpoint, it kind of all at a high level revolves around that. At SEER, we kind of go through a measurement strategy process to kind of align business objectives and goals to measurement. And that's kind of the output of that. So that's kind of how we approach that.
Awesome. And we have 3 more. Do you guys want to read through and kind of take it from there on your end? Because I know we have reporting identity question, properties versus views, and then e-commerce changes. And we have 5 minutes. So I want to make sure we get to at least a few of those. James, I think you had you indicated here you wanted to answer, what do you recommend for reporting identity, using user ID and device, or device only?
Yeah, that's another great question and something I really am excited about for GA4. So this question is getting into how do you identify a user across devices and platforms? So when I'm a user on my laptop, how do I know if that's the same user on my phone is what we're getting at here. And historically, Google Analytics has done this, tried to do this in a couple of different ways, one of them being user ID functionality. So when you log in, you're identified as the same person across devices. That functionality is carried over into Google Analytics 4. The difference is that in Google Analytics 4, it will use user ID when it's available. If you select the using user ID and device, that option, it will use the user ID across all of the reports in GA4. Whereas in Google Analytics today, there's a subset of reports and you have to have a specific view for it. So it's a lot less ingrained in the platform and there's a lot less you can do with the data and it only represents those logged in users. Whereas in GA4, it's a lot more, it's basically built in everywhere and you can now use that. And in GA4, it will look for that user ID. If you opt to turn that on, you opt into the user ID and device, it will look for that user ID first. If that's available, it'll use that to identify the user. If not, it will fall back into two other kind of cascading options. From there, if you have Google Signals turned on, Google will try to use Google Signals to identify the user. And essentially that uses Google's device graph. So if you're logged into something like Chrome and you in your profile I said, I'm okay with sharing my data with Google, Google will then allow GA to actually say, oh, this is the same user that's logged in based on Google's device graph. And if that's not available or you don't have Google Signals turned on for whatever reason, it will then fall back to the device ID. And essentially that's the cookie. If you're on the more technical side of Google Analytics today, what we commonly refer to as the client ID, which is really device ID. So that's the cookie-based one. So to answer your question, what we would recommend kind of depends on your use case, but ultimately I'd love to see a lot of clients adopt user ID where it makes sense, as long as it aligns with your terms of service and what you can do as a business and what you want to achieve.
Awesome, thanks, James. And Emily, can you speak to any e-commerce changes, improvements? I know you've already done some work there.
Yeah, I can speak on that. So e-commerce is not fully built out yet, I think, on GA4. Right now, you can collect some of that e-commerce events. However, that's not really necessarily built into the interface yet. That is something that we anticipate will roll out soon. Can't say exactly when, but if that is something that is important to your business, we might recommend maybe pausing or not really switching over right away until that's further built out, if you're going to use something like that as your source of truth.
Awesome, really helpful. Good to know that that's not fully ready yet, but definitely coming in the future. And Catherine or Winter, properties versus views, I think we've touched on this a few times, but since Google has yet to present a view solution, should multiple properties be created, production, unfiltered, sandbox testing? I think what we're trying to get at here is, do we set up properties the same way that we would set up views, or how should we go about thinking about that?
Yeah, I could, or do you want to go ahead, Winter?
I was just going to point out that you can get into trouble when you try to, compare that apples to apples, the views and the properties. I think it's really important here to think about individual data streams more so, and how you can implement multiple data streams in your one property. Catherine, not sure if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I think we kind of want to move away from thinking in terms of universal analytics and kind of fully embracing the Google Analytics 4 data model and how everything is set up. Like James said, Google is aware that people are kind of heavily invested in views and view filters and the opportunities that those provide. So there should be additional features coming to Google Analytics 4 that kind of fill that gap. But for now, we do have some data filters that we can apply. I would recommend having an unfiltered property just to have all of your data in there, and you're not excluding anything from any of your data sources. And then of course, the BigQuery integration with Google Analytics 4 that's available for all properties is a really great other opportunity for how you can query your data in there as well.
Thank you for that. All right, we are at time. I want to respect everyone's time here. Last few things, the best way to stay up to date on all things GA4 is definitely subscribe to the SEER newsletter. There's also a really great skills shop in Google course to get GA4 certified. We'll send that link in the follow-up email. And if you still have questions, if we didn't answer the questions that you had today, or if you have something more strategic that you're looking for consulting on, there will be a link with more details in the follow-up email so that we can make sure we get your questions answered. So really appreciate everyone joining us today, and have a safe and healthy holiday coming up and a new year. Thank you guys. Thank you, panelists. All right.